Welcome to the Comfortable in Chaos Podcast. Strangle your demons and let's go.
Y'all need Jesus!
So let me go down in history as another blood-bought member of the family. And if they all forget my name, that's fine with me. I'm living for the world to see, nobody but Jesus. Welcome to the Comfortable in Chaos Podcast. I am your host, Eric Hellberg, and you know we're like Einstein over here, men, and we're unashamed. We're unashamed about believing in the Christ. We're unashamed about being nothing without Him. We're just, like the song says, a nobody, trying to tell everybody about somebody who saved our souls. You ready to begin, men? Have you thought about that? Have you told anyone about it? Let that linger. And you don't have to be some puss to think that way. You can be rough, tough, strong, and ready to kick some ever-loving ass. We're a world in perpetual war. Not only in the physical, but certainly in the spiritual. Let's start living like it. Maybe it'll give us the vitality we need to walk through this place. You know what today's episode is going to be called, guys? From Russia with Love. Maybe Roger Moore, right? Maybe James Bond was a Christian. I don't know. He was bedding every gal he could get his hands on. Maybe he was just trying to get information for the kingdom. Really? You know, I don't believe that. A lot of the other attributes, he probably could have been held in check, but we can all improve. But he had a movie called From Russia with Love. So I told you we were going to kick it up a notch today, and let's just do that. So Chelsea Clinton, get your head out of your ass. We're tired of your halfway feminist. We know you're married. I don't know who they arranged that marriage with for you, but we know you're married and you're out there saying, oh, the world is in jeopardy if Donald Trump gets in. No, your mom was scared shitless if Donald Trump gets in because like the N-word that I did on another episode, remember? Narcissists, people that will literally kill others for their own self-gain. She was simply projecting. Wanted people to think that Trump had done what she actually did. So let's begin. Oh boy, during that tenure of Secretary of State, we know she didn't ascend to the presidency, right? And that literally killed her, made her psychotic, made her cackle internally about as much when she was talking about the Arab Spring. We came and he died. Talking about Muammar Gaddafi, guy who simply wanted to be self-sufficient, was getting Africa, especially that part of Africa, in check. You know, they sit up there in the Northeast. But the good old USA couldn't have that, could they? No. We can't have a self-sustaining and prosperous Africa, someone trading in their own currency, with their own reserves, with their own resources, and unabashedly afraid of us. He knew our capabilities. How? Because he had worked for us directly, our intelligence apparatus, for 30 years before that. But he was good until he was no longer any good, so we took him out. We set up that hack, Christopher Stevens. It's a travesty that he died, but he was just a front man in a gun-running scheme to get those weapons, not only from Gaddafi's stores, but other weapons of ours directly into the hands of ISIS because we wanted Bashar Assad gone. How'd that work out for you? So let's touch upon Hillary. Crooked Hillary, as the Donald calls her, got 4 people, really badass people, killed in Benghazi. Others seriously maimed injured. It took years to bring them up to a level of repair. 33,000 emails about her sordid affairs, primarily the Clinton Foundation and how they bought favors and exchanged information and what was really going on behind the scenes. Expunged, gone, nada. What about a little Russian dealings? What about collusion? Russian collusion. Do you know where the preponderance of our weapons-grade uranium went? And they were happy to buy it. They're not fools. They're actually smarter than us. But at that time, Russia was a valued customer. Hillary did the deal. And I damn sure guarantee you that Clinton Foundation, both her and Bill, received enormous amounts of profit for it. But yeah, they sold our uranium to Russia. Then, unbeknownst to Hillary, she thought that she could get one over on Donald. And then she colluded once again in the Steele dossier, right? With good old Mr. Steele, Christopher Steele, known British operative, also who would work with Russian intelligence. But you know what? Russia was onto her. They planted what we call the old breadcrumb trick, so the steps could be retraced. And once Hillary realized this, all of a sudden Putin and Russia were so bad, and she started projecting, just like a good narcissist, and saying that her opponent, who struck fear in her, must have been the one who was doing the colluding. It was all abject nonsense. So thank you, Hillary. We will begin this issue with From Russia with Love. And you know, that kind of reminds me. It kind of reminds me of our good old buddy Tupac Shakur. And how long has it been? And they still don't know, but they really know who killed him. But that dude was a genius, man. And I still dig his music. But since I've been banned from throwing F-bombs out here, I am going to get one in here at some point. Maybe not on this episode, but at some point. My uncle banned me from it. So here's Tupac's quote. Instead of F you, I'm going to say screwed up. Tupac said, "It is screwed up how people get judged for being real and how people get loved for being fake." And that's your whole problem with Trump. I don't give a rat's ass if you like him. He's just being real. He knows he's fallen. He knows he's screwed up. He's just simply trying to do what's best for the country. Hillary Clinton, do you think she has an ounce of sincerity in her? We've already demonstrated her fakeness, albeit she was loved, right? And guess what? Since this is about Russia, let's talk about the real, and that is Russia. And let's talk about the fake, and that is Ukraine. Man, it is bearing down on me, guys. I mean, it is upon us right now. And you're like, well, what is it, Eric? Imagine an elephant is coming after you. All you have is a stick. You don't even know where to begin. You know you can't run. You're out in the open. So damn it, you better start hitting that elephant with that stick the best you can. And that is this Ukraine debacle. I don't know yet if I'm going to break this up into multiple episodes because it is vitally important for you to understand the genesis of what you're hearing about every day on the news, how the American taxpayer is being raped. 500,000 Ukrainians, some of those foreign fighters, meaning mercenaries, have been killed in Ukraine too, fighting for us. We actually have de facto U.S. military personnel concocting strategy and directing the armed forces of Ukraine at this time. There's one particular general, I'm going to get into his background maybe in another episode, called General Aguto. And after Zelensky relieved the last commander, we brought in an American general. Can you imagine that? But this is intricate. It's very detailed. it's very hard to understand, not because the truth isn't out there, but because you have been covered up in so many lies. And what is it that we really know about anything? And I think most of us, especially listeners of my program, have come to the conclusion that we have been deceived, we have been lied to. We typically know very little about what is actually occurring. And Western media throughout the world, and especially here, since we're the primary supporter and driver of NATO, have really taken us as a nail and hit us with that proverbial Russian hammer. So that really brings me to two things. In Hosea in the Bible, it says, "My people perish for a lack of knowledge," and that's true. We're so mired in the minutia of our day-to-day lives. Who can look beyond ourselves? Especially when we believe we're reliant upon these news outlets whereby we can get something that in some way has a modicum of truth in it, correct? Whereby we can kind of guide our thoughts. And it does that. It just guides them into the narrative that this globalist government that we currently have, it didn't used to be that way, but that we currently have wants to drive us to. And I think Thomas Edison was right. Thomas Edison said only 5% of people actually think. 10% of the people believe that they think. They have convinced themselves that they are thinkers, but they're not critical thinkers. Primarily, they probably go by what they hear. The other 85% do not want to think. And governments like ours take advantage of that. When there is a vacuum, you can fill it with all kinds of shit, right? Remember in the old Obama days when his chief of staff was Rahm Emanuel? They obviously had a falling out. Rahm ends up being mayor of Chicago. But what did Rahm famously say? And it actually came directly out of what they all studied, including Hillary, including Barry, Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, right? Never let a crisis go to waste. So in the vacuum of knowledge, they're going to fill it with whatever they want. Because in the country today, we have a crisis of belief, and rightly so. And we certainly have a crisis of understanding, and that is being driven by design to keep us confused and not focusing on what we really need to. And then part of that also I would call, there is a word for it whereby arrival syndrome. Arrival syndrome. It's where someone believes they have accomplished something, typically in some form of material or worldly success. They think for them they are at their apex, maybe even almost untouchable, and therefore they already know everything they need to know. And you know, the higher a monkey goes up a tree, the more it shows its ass. That's when you're really lost. You can always know more. So let's help each other do that today. And let's focus on Ukraine. Isn't it amazing? Now, we know the Clinton Foundation was set up to bilk money from countries. And honestly, I may have to do a story on this. I haven't proofed it yet, but the danglings are there. Who was on the Lolita Express more than anyone else? William Jefferson Clinton, both with Secret Service and without Secret Service. We know these are some pedos, right? And we know that damn Hillary, with her womanly bent, and Huma Abedin, she doesn't fall too far from the tree. So we know that them and their ilk have a propensity for this sort of thing. But I have heard that a lot of the large donations and consistent donations that came in from around the world to the Clinton Foundation, remember, they would never release who their donor list were, even though it was asked for, where the money would come from, and much of that information was included in many of those emails that disappeared off Hillary Clinton's private server. But from 1999 through 2014, the biggest donor country to the Clinton Foundation was the country of Ukraine. Isn't that interesting? Now, Bill Clinton was president up until when? 2000. He set up the foundation after he left office. And then we have 8 years of Bush. And then comes in the old truth teller, Barry Obama. And who does he quickly appoint? After a contentious race, the Clintons hated Obama. The Obamas hated the Clintons, but they needed one another. And each had their own side of the coin that could complement one another. So Hillary becomes Secretary of State, but the Clinton Foundation is already set up. So you have someone representing the American people in the employ of the U.S. government going around the world, all the while the world is giving money to her husband's foundation. Almost sounds like a conflict of interest. I don't think that's ever occurred in history, has it? Okay. So let's now look at Ukraine a little bit more. Who all has worked for oil and or gas pipeline and or just flat out oil and natural gas companies in Ukraine? Mitt Romney's son. Yeah, you didn't know that, right? A senator's son. Nancy Pelosi's son has worked for a Ukrainian oil company as well. Good old John Kerry, his son, has worked for a Ukrainian oil company. And of course, probably the most famous with Burisma headquartered right in Kyiv, Hunter Biden. Whereby Hunter Biden, always saving 10% for the big guy, him and Joe received millions from a Ukrainian oil company. Now, this was why Sleepy Joe was vice president and Hillary was Secretary of State. And don't you find it ironic that the Biden family received millions from Ukraine, and now the Biden administration has been sending hundreds of billions to Ukraine? Now, remember, President Trump promised us a wall. Now, we're talking about Democrats here. Democratic opposition killed that wall. President Trump said, you give me $4 billion, I will complete that wall all the way from the Pacific, and I will run that mother all the way down through the tip of Texas. And it never got done. He couldn't get $4 billion, but I can tell you what, the Democrats just helped release another $60 billion to Ukraine. And another installment, I don't know how many million it is now. Is it $500 billion? I mean, have we got the $350, $400 billion? That's kind of crazy, isn't it? And let's delve into this further. All the aforementioned people that I mentioned, Hillary, Kerry, Romney, Biden, Pelosi, they all wanted the Donald impeached, didn't they? And why was it that they wanted him impeached? Do you remember the fervor really hit the crescendo when an unknowing President Trump, newly in office, or this would be, a little bit further back, he makes a call. he makes a call to then President Zelensky of Ukraine. And the Democrats were squawking. He's saying he's not going to send them aid. Well, why would they need aid? There wasn't a war in Ukraine yet. This was 2020. The special military mission of Russia didn't occur until 2022. What was Ukraine in need of aid for? Weaponry and money. So the implication was that President Trump was going to thwart them receiving that, which means they had been receiving it. And the Democrats were worried it would stop. Why were they getting weapons and money from the United States if there was no war? What did a non-NATO neutral country need at that time? Had they been preparing for something? That's some food for thought, isn't it? And what was the other basis for President Trump's call? He wanted to know what in the F was going on in the Donbass, right? The two independent parts of Ukraine, ethnic Russian speakers that had been at war with the rest of Ukraine, really, the neo-Nazi factions that proliferated after the, if you want to call it, the coup or regime change in 2014. So he's like, hey, I need to know what the hell's going on in the Donbass. Why are these people being shelled? Why is all this conflict going on right now? And under those auspices, he made that phone call. Well, that terrified the people that I just mentioned to you, amongst many others. Now, why did they immediately persecute General Michael Flynn and send that man to prison? He was Trump's national security advisor, but he was intelligence to the bone. And he would have got to the bottom of all this stuff and said what was good where our noses needed to be and what was bad and where we didn't need to be. So he had to go. And once again, we had projection, right? Donald Trump was being a bully to Ukraine, but Ukraine had already become one of our playgrounds. So let that be food for thought. I will continue this on in episode number 2, and we will keep walking through this current debacle in Ukraine that really we don't give a flying you-know-what about, because it's only 500,000 Ukrainians that have been killed for our own fun and games. So until next time on the Comfortable in Chaos podcast, I bid you bon voyage, my burgeoning flock.